Hello, everyone. I'm Tyler Caldwell, and I am with Jeremy Casdagli of Casdagli Cigars. And we want to give you an introduction to the Cypher 3311.
Perfect.
I did it right?
You did it perfectly.
Awesome.
Yes, absolutely. It will roll off the tongue every few
Yes.
months. This was actually a line of cigars which we created to honor my grandfather, and we launched in 2022. I think it was the first PCA after COVID. So whichever date that was, I think it's 22. So it was during the COVID time, which I was always sort of looking at something special. And I always had wanted to honor my grandfather. So a lot of his history, which we'll talk about, and if you're really interested in delving into more of it, is on the internet, and you can Wikipedia him. If I can just talk what made him a famous prisoner of war of the Germans, we can say. And you have to stand just a little bit of that backstory of how he was captured and what he did. And then we'll come on to the cigars, because that gives a nice thing to it. So my grandfather, Lech Casdagli, to understand us, we are Levantine Greeks. The name actually is a confusing one because it's Turkish, although Casdag was Hellenic until 1922. So my grandfather, during World War II, he was in the British Army, but also attached to the Greek force. He could speak fluent Greek. He had been an amateur archaeologist, actually, and all sorts of interesting things in Egypt. And he was fought at the Battle of Crete, 1941, and was captured there. He led the surrender out from Spakia. And they put him on a hellish trip all the way through to northern Germany by rail. The diary has been published. He had a hidden diary, so we know what he went through. But what made him quite famous, well, not quite famous, but in the international press, was that in the first 6 months after being incarcerated, he was still in his tropical uniform when he found himself in the winter of 1941 in Dosel-Vorburg, which was an absolute hellhole. He was attached to a General Kapatos, who was captured with him, who has spoke nothing but Greek, so he was a bit bewildered by the whole thing. And actually quite a famous Greek general from also the wars against the Ottomans in the earlier part of the 1900s. So in freezing conditions, 2,000 British prisoners of war, and there was some barbed wire, and about 30,000 Russians. And so you can imagine what that camp was like. But he managed to convince the Greek general to deliver his sweater to him, his jersey, and he unraveled all his thread. And he created what we call a sampler. He got some linen from another officer. I don't know if you can see that here. And this is about so big. He did this sewing. And by the way, the German administration was quite happy for him to do this. And I do underline that because you'll see around the inside, you've got a British lion, a Soviet symbol here, the hammer and sickle, the Nazi Germany, and an eagle. Unfortunately, it's not the American one, because if you read through this the introduction to it, so to speak, it says, "This work was done by Major A.T. Casdagli, number 3311, his POW number, whilst in captivity, Dosel-Vorburg, Germany, December 1941. It's when you chaps joined the party. Thank you for that."
You're very welcome.
And so that eagle is the Italian eagle. And we have cotton spools running around the outside. We're an Egyptian cotton family. So all cotton came from southern Egypt, northern Sudan. Okay, so this hung on the hut in Dosel-Vorburg, and he was eventually shipped off to Spangenberg Castle, his general, which was kind of like Colditz Castle, those that are into that part of history, and for VIPs and naughty boys. Okay, so, and then at the end, after 3 years there, he was then on a death march and was liberated by the Americans in Hadamar concentration camp. So thank you for that. My grandfather always loved your country. Didn't have much time for German friends at the time, but there you go. But what the Germans never spotted, because all of these embroideries he left at the castle, and a lovely German civilian had sent them on to the family in 1946, saved them. And because it had Casdagli on the back, it's a particular name, so he could track us down. And you might spot here little dots and dashes. And if you do Google Casdagli, and I'll give you the final words on that one, how you can look it up, In the middle, he has God Save the King, God Save the King, and around the outside it says "F Hitler, F Hitler, F Hitler" 5 times. So if you're really interested in the story, just do Casdagli, F Hitler, and you're going to get a lot of papers from the Times newspaper, and it's been in many museums.
Sure.
So that being said, my grandfather passed on in the early 90s, and in 2012, they had a big exhibition of him and Winston Churchill, and both families there, of their 2 most famous prisoners of war that had been to Harrow School. And Winston, of course, was a prisoner of the South African Boers during the Boer War. And so I live in Estonia now, and my father calls me after this, from that place, this particular embroidery had also been in the Albert Museum, and the Imperial War Museum called my father and said, "Official Secrets Act's over, we got special things to show you." And my father calls me and says, "When you're next home in London, come and see what I've been delivered." And there were all the letters from my grandfather to my grandmother delivered through the Red Cross. And in there were codes. And my father said to me, "Jem, during the war, when these letters were delivered to your grandmother, she was always crying the next day." And I always thought it was like, there must be sad stuff in there. But actually, he said, and he was a top military man as well, he said some upper-class thug would deliver the letters and they'd pick them up the next day, say, "Some of this is for you, Mrs. Casdagli, the rest is for us." You might not understand it. So he was a member of MI9, and MI9 was responsible for intelligence coming from the prisoners of war camps, for also escaped officers or other prisoners, information on them, and also the escape lines that both prisoners escaping and American and British bomber crews, those escape resistance lines to get them to Spain or Switzerland or what have you. So I thought I have to honor this. And I wrote to the Estonian Red Cross and I gave a link. I said to my grandfather's stories, his books and his stuff about this, books about him. And it said my grandfather always wrote in his diaries, "I thank the Red Cross for, it said the Red Cross saved my life, my stitching saved my sanity." So I said, I'm going to make, and here's a link to my company I sent them, and I create cigars. I want to actually honor the Red Cross, and I want to deliver for every cigar sold that I'm going to do, contribute to the Red Cross, each one. And I'll be very open about it. €1 each. Now, any of us working in the cigar business know that's a big, hefty part of what we do with the cigars. So they called me, and this is quite a funny little meeting, and then we'll rush on to the cigars. They said, it was during COVID, as I said, so I'm there with my bloody mask on. There's 3 chaps there, and they're all masks, and they had a television at the end. And I suppose the Red Cross would be a bit upset at me telling how the meeting went, but, here we are with the cigar smokers, and it all ended well. So I think she was one of the main fundraisers for the Red Cross, a very beautiful lady. Said, "Jeremy, it took us a couple of weeks to come back to you because I ordered your grandfather's books and I wanted to read about it. And, first of all, Jeremy, we do not endorse companies. You might be making baby food, but perhaps you're an American company. We have the Red Crescent. We are bipartisan. And your grandfather was making escape equipment from our Red Cross parcels. That's not what they were for." So he said, because that could have all sorts of trouble for us trying to help prisoners of war on both sides if that got out. I mean, everyone suspected it, but there was no proof. So I said, moreover, you don't do baby food, do you, Jeremy? You're a tobacco. And he mentioned a very big company that delivers tens of millions each year to the Red Cross. And he said, they're never to be mentioned. It makes you feel a little bit different about big tobacco, actually, on hearing that. When I looked over your Virginia tobacco fields in North Carolina yesterday, I said, they're doing good stuff too, right? And I said, so why am I here? And they said, well, you're going to make for you, we're going to treat differently. We're making an exception. Do not put Red Cross all over your damn boxes, but you can put a nice insert in there and say you deliver to the Red Cross. For our help and current. So I did it. So I went to work and I wanted to do, and this is what we created. And many of you might have come across this when we launched it. And we made initially 4 cigars and then we added an extra one. And so we do a mysterious blends in here. This is the only really time we do undisclosed blends, if I may say so. It's all a bit of a mystery, the secret war. But we have a Diademas. You've got one of them here. Look at this baby. You can tell this is all coming from, again, the Inversiones Gonzalez Martinez, a Cuban expatriate-run company in Costa Rica. And, of course, that is a very old Cuban Vitola, Diademas. Okay, we call it the Lorenz. It's a German coding machine, which was a bloody hard one to break. It's a hard cigar to roll, and it's quite a difficult one to smoke. You've got to know what you're doing. They're very satisfying when you break it, which is kind of what we do with that one. The Lorenz, we have a double Corona Enigma, again, German coding machine, and you can see they both have a darker Ecuadorian Corojo. Because they're the bad guys, right? And then we have a lighter, kind of like a Colorado Ecuador here for the Colossus. Now, I'm not a big one for big ring gauges. If we do make them, I make a campana. I like it sitting nicely in my mouth. This is rate with a punch, obviously. And so it's a 6x60, and we call it the Colossus, which is the first mainframe computer Alan Turing made to break these two little chaps here, with help from the Polish as well, and various other countries. It wasn't just us.
Yeah.
I don't think it was the American on a Ship. I don't know what that movie was. It was something called... it was some strange movie came out a few years ago. But that one we have, and we also have the box-pressed... and by the way, that mainframe computer has big rollers on it, hence the 6x60. We have a box-pressed Churchill, we call a needle, because my grandfather needled the Germans. And we eventually came out with Boniface, which was the code name for Ultra. That's an interesting story of itself, but we only have so much time.
Sure.
Okay, so, and we put them in coffin boxes, and they really look beautiful with the Morse codes on the outside. We've got lots of hidden symbols. We have 3 witches on there, which is all part of it. You can look that up yourself and try and find it. And also we have poppies. We have boxes of 8 with poppies on the outside of the box, 8 poppies. And if you look very carefully at the stalks, you'll see the Chinese number of 8 for hope and luck, which also in Latin is also 8. It's infinity, hope and luck. And they have a blend which has disrupted this blend here. It's a play on the game. So as for the ring, we chose one of my grandfather's embroideries, and since we are here today and I'm a long way from home, I knew I was coming to do this, and I wanted to show this to you.
I appreciate that.
And this was created by my grandfather in 1943, and this is what forms the ring on the cigars. And it all has a beautiful note here, which we don't replicate. We just put the shield on for the ring, right? But what I have, what you have, I hold. I'm all right, which is his freedom. And we have, very briefly here, we have squash tennis rackets, his amateur squash champion of Egypt, his rank of Major General, his ladder of escape committee. The Germans knew he was a bad one, and that's why he was there, right? So strangely enough, the Wehrmacht allowed him to do this. And there's a ship in the top right corner, which actually has this message for the Germans as well, actually was captors. The Germans today are lovely people, but let's just say this is historical.
Sure.
And that was a ship called the Pasteur, where German prisoners of war abused. And it was really stating to the Germans, yes, we're remembering your prisoners of war. Some might think, but actually it was, you f*** with us, we can f*** with you back. It was a little warning for them. So there you have it. And the Red Cross were very overwhelmed. In fact, they said to me, when I showed them the box and the beauty, in fact, the packaging, Half Wheel, Charlie, called it in, I think, the most beautiful packaging alongside the Uber cigar from the Mirafels, and I think it was the Davidoff Year of a Dragon, and the Cypher 331, the most beautiful packaging that year to come out. And funny enough, the Estonian Red Cross said, you know, we actually none of us smoke, but perhaps, you know, your community, sitting and smoking, might remember the Red Cross when you tell your wonderful stories. And I think that's really very moving. And I can let you one guess, which is the biggest market for this in Europe. Germany. It really, the reception's amazing.
It all comes full circle.
It does indeed. They've taken me to the castles. I've been driven to some of the camps. And we were even Had a wonderful meeting with a chap called Rolf Muller. Those that are fans of Gladiator would notice him was a chap that had the arrow in the leg. And he came and visited me and said some very kind words, and we spent some time together. So there you go.
I mean, just incredible history to go along with an incredible cigar. So make sure to check it out on Smoking Pipes. Get
And
these.
this is yours.
Well, it's going to take me a while to smoke that one.
Well, you've got time. That's what we have in this business.
Plenty of time.
Put it in your humidor, and you have a
course.
special moment, and you're watching The Great Escape or whatever you might do,
Of
then you can have
course.
a good smoke of that.
But yes, check out Casdagli Cigars on Smoking Pipes, Cypher 3311, and let us know what you think.
Thank you.